I wonder, Caverly, if you'll be open to start the conversation maybe by sharing a little bit about your journey as a spiritual practitioner and then as a spiritual teacher. How do you wrestle with these questions of racism, of dominance, of all of the isms, like someone said in the chat, that we're mentioning only one of them?
Yeah, thank you. I'd be happy to start us off with that. I want to acknowledge just the beautiful inquiry I see coming in the sidebar. I want to start by just naming the sincerity I hear coming through people's desire to explore. So just know that I've been multitasking over here and listening to Zaya and Maurizio, but also reading. So thank you. And I do think it's important, again, to start this 3-part series by acknowledging we're coming in through many different doorways through in this conversation. And any conversation that has that feel of sort of preaching to the choir, in a sense, doesn't interest me as much as what a phrase that I first heard Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams say, which is loving across lines of difference. And again, I would love, given that just on this call alone, we have a wide range, I can see in the chats, we have a wide range of entry points for this conversation. How can we, in our spiritual practice, be living into, modeling, manifesting an intention to love across lines of difference? Because if we have trouble doing it here you've opted in, we know you appreciate non-dual teachings, we know that you care about oneness, we know that naturally implies that you care about all of humanity, the world, consciousness at large. So again, how might we live into that? But to speak directly to what Zaya asked about, how do I live into that and what is my starting point? I'm happy to acknowledge that I began after I had been practicing for some time, and I moved to a Zen Buddhist monastery. For many, many years, it was a silent Zen Buddhist monastery, and for many years, I focused very specifically on my own practice of presence. I was trained in a setting where there was focus on basic Zen practice, as well as a lot of emphasis on seeing how the ego or the conditioned system is structured. So how do we identify with this illusion of a self that is separate from life? And everyone on this call likely knows the benefit of being able to see the ego for what it is and not confusing the ego to be you, to be able to make that, to have that discernment, but also a place that I started to get to start to ask a lot of questions as a monk was around how is it that in that approach of recognizing conditioning, we're sometimes making the conditioned system separate from awareness itself or separate from consciousness? So it began non-dual teachings spoke to me deeply, and I began to have greater and greater interest in, just to make it quite succinct, in a consciousness-only model. So as I began to deepen my experience of these non-dual teachings, something else became very curious to me. And that specifically was, if I have found so much benefit from seeing personal conditioning in my life, if it's enhanced my own experience so deeply in practice to see how the ego is structured, to not identify with that ego, to know that I am not that ego, why have we been leaving out collective ego? I saw so much profound learning from addressing what I saw as sort of a personal form of a sense of I, but I saw really being left out this sense of collective I or societal I. And that process, that moving into that inquiry has been my greatest place of inquiry since. Wanting to see in the same way that we can disidentify with the personal sense of I, this personal illusory identity, and thus experience ourselves as consciousness itself, as awareness. What happens when we are engaged in the same process collectively? So how might we bring attention to these structures that tend to veil our true nature, in the same way that my practice had revolved around bringing attention to structures that veiled true nature on a more personal sense?
Yeah, I wonder how we would love to make it even a little more tangible. Like for us, the realization came when. Do you want to share the story of you showing the trailer of Sand? Is that something?
Well, yeah, Victoria. I went to this gathering like 4 or 5 years ago and show in Whitby Island. Actually, somebody's from Whitby. Maybe you were there, and at the gathering, and I show so proudly this trailer of Sand and Science and Non-Duality. This beautiful.
The wisdom.
We are one. Everybody have each other. And at the end, I was so so proud and expecting so much love and support, and I got destroyed, bashed. I said, well, there was only one woman there playing the cello. They're all white men talking about science and talking about non-duality. And I was like, well, I didn't even see it. I didn't even notice. I had no idea. This was like the most normal thing for me. And knowing that our team is mostly women, that the project was done with Zaya, but I was there by myself. So I felt so basically something fell off from my bullshit wall. All the bells were ringing. I said, what's going on here? And from there, it became...
As it something started slowly opening, and we started looking at our community of teachers, our community that attendees, that yes, we were community of white people with a certain privileged position to gather and to listen and to take in those teachings. And we started even asking why we don't see a more diverse teachings, more diverse flavors of wisdom, like why the indigenous wisdom is not here? Why the...
and we had good reason, but from a good place of in good faith, honestly, right?
And Caverly, you had as well experience speaking at Sand as well the first time, if you may. Like, what did you see, or what can you say about your
aha moment?
Yeah, I just appreciate this. I think because I left the monastery and was so clear that I wanted the rich tools of practice to be available and accessible without people having to go to a monastery to get them. And so I dove into the world very, very fully. I dove into being in meetings with the Portland public school system and, looking at how we might structure a program. As you mentioned, Zaya, the first semester-long course in mindfulness, which it goes way beyond Mindfulness 101. It's really a course. We're with the same set of teams over 75 hours. So it's a class that goes deep into questions about who are we? Who are you? And so because I was intersecting in a new way with people from all different backgrounds, walks of life, spiritual practices, traditions, non-spiritual practices and traditions, I began to realize how much I had to learn about all the places that I hadn't been recognizing my own what my own conditioned view, like what I'm bringing to the conversation. And in terms of loving across the lines of difference, I began to be opened in so many new ways to hear perspectives that I hadn't heard, and specifically to have reflected to me blind spots, to specifically see, oh, there's so many things that I haven't considered based on my own upbringing. I come from a place of not tremendous wealth, but I come from a very solidly upper middle class background from Virginia. I had a lot to learn about my own position and what I hadn't explored regarding my own position. So for example, when the first time I went to SAND, because I'd been beginning the process of engaging in these conversations in a brand new way, when I first went to SAND, I confess, and I can say this to you all because I say it with great love, I came into the space and I was like, this looks like a white caucused conference. Like, wow, this is fascinating. How does a topic which relates to all of us, what is in place that makes it such that this is so severely predominantly a white space? And I appreciate deeply that years ago when we were first in conversation about this, it felt like the beginning of the conversation was, it was mentioned, we just need to have more people of color presenting. And it's a huge turn to have that conversation move from we need to have more people of color presenting to asking what am I doing? How am I contributing to a space that maintains a certain kind of club-like membership feel to it? What am I bringing to that? What is there for me to see? What is there for me to unpack about my participation in that? And that's a really important turn, I think. And just briefly, if I may, I think the reason we get so stuck in this conversation is because so often we start to make that turn and we feel like, oh, now I'm just under attack and I'm a bad person and it's hard for me to move forward and embrace this conversation because I feel defensive about it. And I think that's now seems to me, Zaya and Maurizio, that's what you're in a place of kind of wanting to move beyond. It's a next place to move through. How might we feel that kind of resistance or defensiveness and still move forward with our questions?